This is the Misdirected Mark Podcast, a podcast about gaming, game mastering, and entertaining you, our listeners. We are explicit, you have been warned, and I'd like to thank Mike Willard for letting us use his music on our show. Now let's pick up those mics and get on with this thing.
Okay, so we've tried this for like 6 turns and failed.
Tell you what, I'll overwatch for you. Take a shot.
All right, I'm going to take careful aim here. Let's see, I got a 2d10 plus 5. All right, I got a 15.
Okay. Hang on. Yep, that's going to hit.
Way to go.
Wait a minute. Didn't a 16 miss 2 turns ago?
Yeah, but like there have been some situational changes in like the last 2 turns, so your 15 totally hits.
At least we finally hit it. I thought the scene was never going to end.
Yeah, that wasn't going to happen.
And with that, welcome to the 41st episode of the Misdirected Mark Podcast. Tonight we're going to discuss the pros and cons of fudging dice in your tabletop role-playing games. Along the way, you'll take your comments, suggestions, and examples live in the chat room for life on Twitch before jumping into the after show. But first, my name is Jerry.
My name is Phil.
And I am Old Man Logan. Welcome again to the Misdirected Mark Podcast, and welcome to our temperature check segment. Let's see how everybody's feeling. Phil.
I have cleared quarantine.
Yay.
I've served my 10 days at home, stayed out of the general populace. I am still, I feel fine. So I was asymptomatic before, still feel fine. Mental health wise, I'm doing better today. I was starting to lose it at the end of quarantine, like big bout of depression, but I took Monday off. I'll talk about it more in the community corner to get some stuff done, but definitely feeling better. That's me. How about you, Bob?
Yeah, I am. I'm rocking a solid average still. Chugging along, not super high, not super low. So middle of the road. Yay. Jerry?
Doing pretty good. Just had a good weekend, having a decent week. Feeling much better. The up and down weather always causes me to get sniffly and sneezy and all that, but I'm used to it. Got enough sleep this weekend, so I feel good. So I'm ready to take everything on this week. So bring it on.
All right. Good times.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
That'll roll us into the one thing. We're going to kind of push through these things at a semi-rapid pace because we got a big show tonight. So I did not put anything in the one thing. Why did I?
Yours should be Bill's game.
Yeah. Watching football. You know, it's football season, and I love watching football. And the Bills beat the crap out of their opponent again this week. So yay!
That was a good one.
That. Good times. What about you, Jerry?
We have a problem. We played Knights Black Agents this weekend. We played it online because our GM was in quarantine, and it worked really well. We had a good time. Played very well online. We got a really good group of players, and it was just fun to get back to role-playing games again. I haven't done a lot of them in the last 3-4 months, and Knights Black Agents is a great game, and we got a chance to kind of flex our skills and see how the game actually works, because it's a game that I haven't played all that much. So it was neat to see how all the mechanics worked, how the players interacted, and we're still a very teamwork-oriented group, so it was just a lot of fun. It was hanging with your friends. How about you, Phil?
Well, I finished my quarantine, like I said, during the temperature check. That was like my big thing for the week. It was okay. Like overall, I mean, I worked from home. I had groceries delivered. I got Chinese food delivered one day. But like it just started to like come apart at the edges by Sunday. I pulled it together enough to play NBA and then just kind of fell apart after, and just made it through. Monday was my first day, out of quarantine. And so I, spent Monday, scrubbing my house. So I took all the bedding from my house and went to the laundromat. Got it washed. I opened up all the windows and vented the whole house. I got Lysol and sprayed down surfaces and mattresses, pillows, the couch. I cleaned my CPAP for the first time in forever. like deep cleaned my CPAP. So like I just like it was all that stuff, like water bottles, like all that stuff. So, and then I went and got my hair cut because I needed a haircut before I got put into quarantine. And then like an extra week and my hair was like, I don't know if you remember from last week. I don't think most people noticed, but it was like super puffy. And it right now is in its optimal form, which is if you've ever seen me at a convention, you're like, I don't know, Phil's hair looks like it always does because I always get a haircut before a convention. So I look the way most people outside of you guys actually see me. Right. So, but that haircut did a lot. Anyway, that's me. We can roll right into the announcements because like you said, we got a big episode tonight.
All right, but we do have one announcement this week. Our own Andi Fox has a new Etsy store, the Crafty As A Fox store. They're making cards for all sorts of occasions. So send a card and show your care because new cards are being added all the time for occasions both traditional and new. Find them at www.etsy.com/shop/crazy-as-a-fox-store. I will put this is going to be in the show notes. I'm also going to put it into the Slack room channel. So for all the Slack room members,
/shop.
Etsy.com/shop/crafty-as-a-fox-store. But for those of you who've been part of the Slack room and listened on Mumble recently, you've heard Andi talking about this, and sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun. Some really interesting cards coming through there.
Yeah, you said Crafty as a Fox, right?
The first time you said Crazy as a Fox, and then he corrected it.
It's Crafty as a Fox.
Okay.
Yes.
Chat room's catching up with you.
Yep.
Thank you.
I think
as a fox. Crafty as a fox. Thank you.
I think Andi should make cards like a TPK card, like sorry I TPK'd you, right? Like, and just like a card that a DM could give to their players, like sorry I TPK'd you last game, or sorry I betrayed the party would be like, that would be a great card for somebody like in the party who like fucks up, like sorry I betrayed you all, like here's a card.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
That should be that should be like some of the sorry I hogged the spotlight, right? Like
there
sorry
sorry I killed your favorite NPC.
Sorry I fridged you. It's the card's a little fridge and you open it up. Sorry I fridged your NPC.
Horrible. All right, before we go down the rabbit hole on that, we should move on to the thing, which is our favorite segment. Phil, gird yourself.
I'm ready.
And go.
Workshop. Fudging. We're talking about fudging. Oh my God, I can't believe we're talking about fudging. Is this topic ever going to die? No, it never will die. Therefore, we must weigh in here in the workshop.
And don't suck.
Well, holy shit. Just like the leaves changing color, or the phases of the moon, or the orbit of the Earth around the sun, once again, the topic of fudging and fudging dice arose on Twitter. This argument, which is so old that my very first Gnome Stew article in 2008, I actually talked about this. And I was inspired from times before that of being in various arguments in conventions about the, quote, sanctity of the dice.
Yes.
But because it made its rounds on Twitter, and because 140 characters or 280 characters isn't nearly enough to encapsulate our thoughts,
correct,
we're going to take a whole show and revisit the concept of fudging.
All right. First of all, we're going to take this from a neutral standpoint, being either in support of fudging or against it. What we're going to do instead is discuss what fudging is, why it occurs, and tips on doing it correctly, if you're going to do it in the first place.
Yeah, so, of course, to get started, we need to know some definitions for our stuff. So, Phil, let me set you up.
Behold! You are in the presence of Definition Panda.
Oh boy. All right. Well, we got a couple. We got to lay out some terms, get everything squared away before we get deep into our discussion. So I try to do this quickly, but not too fast. First things first, our main word for tonight is, of course, fudging, right? Which is adjust or manipulate facts or figures as to present a desired picture, right? So in role-playing games, fudging most often means the manipulation of values in a roll.
For example, if you're the GM, if you roll a natural 20, you might decide to make it a 19 so you don't trigger a critical. Just take it easy on the players.
Sure. Fudging can be used in a broader term besides just the rolling of the dice to mean the manipulation of anything like difficulties for tasks, hit points, damage, those kinds of things.
So you might, for example, set the difficulty of something to be 17, but the player rolls a 15 and you say, you know what, that's a success. Maybe the first attack of the player in the very first round of combat does enough damage to completely TPK the monster. So you decide to add an extra 20 hit points to it so it lasts another turn or two just to make the encounter more interesting for everybody. And maybe your monster does enough damage to trigger a massive damage save, but you shave a few points off and just do normal damage so that the players aren't wiped out in the first round. Yep. That's sort of fudging.
Yeah, that's fudging.
Yep.
All right, next one is hand waving. This is the dismissal of a rule either in the moment or for an entire session or campaign. In RPGs, right, this often comes into play a few ways, right? One of the most common ones is just to not call for a check when one is normally needed.
For example, you're sitting across a compound full of guards. The GM tells you don't need to make a roll for it when you normally would, just because it works better if you just stick across for the sake of the story.
Sure. Or you could just, remove a rule from a game, be it for a scene session or like forever.
Right. For example, you may hand wave encumbrance entirely. You just never use it in any of the games.
Yeah. Hand waving's like fudging, but it's less about messing with numerical components of the game and more about like messing with the procedural parts of the game, right? So like when you hand wave something, like you're hand waving a check, you're hand waving a rule, whereas with fudging, right, I'm playing with the numbers of the game, right, in one way or another. Right. They're not unrelated to one another, right? Which is why we're defining it. Like sometimes you choose fudging over hand waving, sometimes you just hand wave things. Okay. Next one is not to be overly controversial. The word is cheating. To act dishonestly or unfairly in order to gain advantage, especially in a game or examination. So we need to unpack a few words here. Dishonest being one of them, right? Behaving or prone to behave in an untrustworthy or fraudulent way. Unfairly in a way that doesn't follow the rules of a game or sport. That one's probably the real one to drill in as we talk a little bit further in the episode about fudging and cheating. And I wanted to get this out, right? Because we do need to talk about that, right? Like there are some people on the internet who are like, fudging is cheating, and no, it's not. And we'll get into it and unpack it a little bit more as we keep going. One last definition to get us out of this segment, which is ethics. Moral principles that govern a person's behavior or the conducting of an activity. In this case, the conducting of a role-playing game. So we are going to talk about whether fudging is ethical or not, or how to make it ethical.
All right, so those are all great, important definitions for the show tonight. Now, as we get into this, Jerry, can we talk about why a GM would fudge a roll, a check, or their damage or whatever?
There's a lot of reasons why a GM might want to do that. But first, we have to just eliminate one of the reasons right off the bat. And that reason is for maliciousness. If the GM is fudging dice to punish the players in some way out of some anger or competition with the players, that's just malicious. The reason we have to eliminate this is because there's no case where it's ever right to maliciously fudge the game in order to hurt or punish the players or their characters. This is just plain wrong, always. You should never be maliciously fudging the dice just to hurt the characters or the players. Taking that off the table, the core reason why GMs fudge dice comes down to one basic tenet, and that is they're going to fudge dice when the random outcome of the game mechanics are not in alignment with what the GM wishes the story itself to be.
Yeah. So let's go into this a bit, right? In any GM-based RPG, the GM at all times is managing two things, right? They're managing the mechanics of the game.
Okay. Excuse me. Includes things like setting difficulties, making opposed checks, educating rules for diplomacy checks, etc., etc., etc. Basically, all the little mechanical things.
and they're managing the direction of the story as it's unfolding through play.
And this includes things like foreshadowing, the scene setting, scene closing, the pacing of the game, the rising action, the denouement, everything in between.
Yep. So there are times where these two things are just in perfect alignment.
But sometimes the GM needs to find a piece of information from the town guard, and the characters are talking to that guard, and one of the characters simply makes their diplomacy check. Perfect. You get what you want.
Yep. So perfectly in alignment. Sometimes they can be out of alignment, but it's not really a big deal.
Right. So maybe the GM wants the character to be chased by the town guard and ultimately escape the town so they can start the next encounter. However, the character is leading them on a rooftop chase, and the character fails their jump check, falls for damage, but keeps running, and eventually escapes. That scene took longer than the GM wanted, and the character is a bit rougher shape, but the scene still ended the way that they wanted to.
Yep. And then lastly, they can be way out of alignment with each other.
For example, the characters at the start of a dungeon encounter, and they encounter a challenging but not impossible opponent who just crits and kills the wizard in the first round of combat. Opening shot, wizard's dead. At this point, it's doubtful the party's going to continue into the dungeon any further without their wizard, and then luckily it's going to turn around and go back to town and get a new wizard. On top of that, there was nothing really heroic about the wizard's death. They open the door, a wizard dies, that's it. It's random, it's anticlimactic, and it really wasn't fun for anybody.
Yeah. So when the GM's idea of where the game is going falls out of alignment with where they want the story to go, this is a place where the GM could fudge a roll, fudge the damage amount, change the DC, just to get everything back into alignment.
There's a number of ways that these two things could fall out of alignment, but some of the common ones are going to be, first of all, there's a logical flaw in the scenario. Maybe the GM underestimated the difficulty encounter that killed the wizard. I thought a bunch of first level D&D characters could take out an ogre in the first room, that sort of thing. Second is going to be if the application of the rule would, or through a random roll, just put the game out of alignment. Maybe the character should make a check for cross this narrow ledge, but if they fall into the gorge, it's going to be not interesting and delay everything down. So we're just not going to have them fail the check to get them across that gorge and keep the story going, because the gorge itself isn't interesting and neither is what's at the bottom.
Yeah.
Lastly, you may have some times where a random roll just produces a completely unexpected result. When the player gets a luckily critical hit at the climactic scene and one-shots the big bad evil guy right in the first round. That's not what some GMs want for their games. But in all these cases, it just takes a little bit of the GM to nudge things back in alignment by fudging a little bit of something.
Yeah. So some games are more prone to like having GMs fudge them than others, right? Games that have mechanics that allow the GM and or the player to do the realigning within the mechanics of the game are less prone to fudging, because those mechanics allow you to kind of make those adjustments instead of just the GM arbitrarily changing numbers, right? So some of those mechanics are games that have player mitigation or GM mitigation mechanics. We've talked about this in a past episode. So we're talking about things like hero points, bennies, fate points, the pushing a roll in the one roll engine, those kinds of things. Something where it's like, well, I failed this roll and I really wanted to make this roll. Therefore, I will spend this resource to try again.
These type of mechanics, though, they enable the player or the GM to reroll outcomes. And this allows for a chance for a rerolled failed to them to try again. Mr. Mark, word scramble. It's going to allow them to reroll a failed roll and attempt to get a positive outcome. And in some cases, the GM can simply say things like, okay, if you need to succeed, it's going to cost you a Benny or a fate point or something and get you past. It's another way to kind of fudge everything.
Yeah. So then games that have healing, like advanced healing or magical healing and or resurrection mechanics will mitigate things like massive damage and death.
For example, a blow that kills the wizard is not going to end the life of the wizard as much as be a resource drain on the party as they have to bring that wizard back to life.
Yeah, notice like if your wizard gets one-shotted in like a 12th level like fantasy, like I'm just going to say like Pathfinder or 3.5 game, right? If your wizard gets one-shotted at 12th level, that's just like for the cleric to get over there and bring him back to life, as opposed to like your first or second level wizard who gets one-shotted by like, the lucky goblin, and you're all like, well, that's it for Charlie, right? Like,
Yep.
we don't have
Stupid
that
house
resource
cat.
in our, we don't have that resource at our hands. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Games that have fail forward or success with consequence mechanics also tend to be less, like, you tend to need to fudge them less.
Because you've got a chance for the GM to realign the story, but make the failed save still have some sort of consequences. And that works really well because there's still some challenges and some threat to failure, but it doesn't mean the end of the game just because somebody rolled badly.
Yeah. And then, finally, like games where the outcome of a failed roll is narrated by the GM and is not just a binary outcome, right? Where there's like a choice of options that the GM can take when a roll is failed.
And the big obvious one here is Dungeon World and the rest of the PBTA games, where you have things like hack and slash that allows the GM to make a move rather than just say something misses. If the player doesn't succeed, they can still have something happen that doesn't result in their immediate death or something along that line. Works out pretty well.
If you think about it, right? Like you would never really as a GM, you can't fudge a roll in Dungeon World because you don't make any.
Yeah.
But you also don't have to worry about like keeping the story aligned with where you want it to go, because if a player rolls a 6, you just make a move that's in alignment with the story.
Yep.
Yeah.
But there are games that lack these mechanics, and those games are going to be more at the whim of the outcome of the dice, and so they can feel more arbitrary. These games, the ones where the only tool the GM has for realigning the game is going to be some sort of fudging to make things work.
Yeah, and that all makes sense. Fudging is something that a GM can do to exert control on the game and keep it going the way they had in mind when they prepped it if things start to get out of whack. But Phil, is that important?
Right? I don't know if the answer to that's simple, right? I think there's a bit of nuance to that question, right? Is it important? I think it is important to some people, right? I think it has a lot to do with the concepts of randomness and storytelling, right? Games that lead more towards randomness, don't have a lot of the mechanics that we talked about above. They might have some of them, but not a lot of them. And thus the game is, heavily driven by the outcome of dice, right? So, how a thing happens, whether a combat goes down a certain way, whether checks are, passed, failed, whatever. You let the dice hit the table and you find out, right? Those are games that lean heavily on randomness. Games that lean more on storytelling often have mechanics in them to empower the GM and players to help keep the game in line with the story. Right? That's just, and these games are like Powered by the Apocalypse is like a perfect example of that. It's definitely a game that helps you. It helps you greatly keep the game aligned with, where you think it's going to unfold. But ultimately, this really comes down to preference, right? For your preference as a GM, what you like to run, what you want to present to players, like how you GM, right? Are you a GM that wants to tell a story? Are you a GM who is like shows up to see what happens? Those kinds of things, right? And what your players enjoy, right? Do your players enjoy just sheerly throwing the dice and seeing what happens? Or are they in it because they want to be part of an epic story?
I think you just answered the next section. So
I think I did too. I'll just keep going. I was on a roll.
That's good.
Right. So the thing is, no one just wants one of these, right? Like, I love a good story, but I also like appreciate, the game part of the game, right? Like there's a saying Chris used to say all the time, like if we're not going to play with all the rules, we could just pass the stick and do pass the stick storytelling, right? There's like for each person, there's a ratio of what you like here. And so it's going to be a mix for us. Like we want to, even if we say we like stories, we may also still like the game part of it as well.
Yeah, a lot of us want the excitement of rolling the hit. We don't want to die meaningless death. We don't want to have an epic battle with the big bad guy at the end of the game. we want some tension. We want our characters to suffer in their failures, but we don't want it to be the end of the game itself.
Yeah. So in the greater context of all of this, right, we need to understand in ourselves and in our players, what is it we like? Where's our ratio of randomness to storytelling, right? Do you lean one way or the other? And I'll be honest, it doesn't even have to be in general, right? Like it could be for this game. It could be in general. You might just be like, look, I like story over mechanics every time, hands down. That's me. Or you could be like for instance, Dungeon Crawl Classics. That's a game where I'm just like, shit, man, just let the dice fall wherever they may. I don't care what happens. Yep. Like, I don't care if characters die. I don't care if you kill the big bad in like 2 shots. Like, whatever happens in that game.
Yep.
But I don't have that same feeling about other games. Right. So it like when I said it's nuanced, right? Like this is complicated in terms of what you like. Okay.
So what it comes down to is what exactly does also have to do with fudging itself. And it comes down to the fact that if you're in a group that has a stronger preference for story, and you play a game that's more random, then the GM's going to probably have to fudge a few things to make the story go the way you want. So if you're in a group that loves stories, you might want to stop playing games that don't have some of the mechanics we've linked above. If you don't want to change games because you love the game, then accept that sometimes the GM may need to fudge things in order to make for a better story. In other words, based on the game that you're playing and the players and playstyle that you want, is going to determine how much fudging is required to make the game flow that everybody's having a good time.
Absolutely. And we've talked about playing games that are a better fit for your group many, many times before, but that's not why we're here. We're talking about fudging. So to keep it on topic, Jerry, you and Phil made some good points about why a GM might need to fudge the game, but is fudging cheating? Here's the alarm bells going off.
Well, that could be a tricky question, depending on how you look at it. On the one hand, most games don't talk about fudging. A lot of games mention it. They acknowledge the GM may have to do it sometimes. I don't remember any game that expressly forbids it, but I'm sure there's one out there, so please feel free to let us know. But on the other hand, it's implied that you use the value of the dice you rolled.
Yeah, you don't go 7 spaces in Monopoly when you rolled a 6 because, just because landing on Marvin Gardens would be more exciting than not.
That's a board game.
Yeah, I'm with you, right? Like,
it's a valid example, though.
Yeah, no, it's a great example. I'm just being sorry.
Well, because Monopoly also doesn't tell you that you can't. Monopoly doesn't say that you can just, you can't fudge the dice, but it also implies that you roll the dice and take the value you were given.
Yeah. Monopoly doesn't say the banker can quietly slip extra hundreds out of the bank into their pocket, but I've seen that happen too.
Well, so we know that's cheating.
That is cheating. So no, but that's what I'm saying. It's exactly there. Just because the game doesn't say something, you still have to kind of go by what the table wants to do.
The spirit is the spirit versus the letter, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the thing we talked about in Monopoly, the purest form of definition we outlined above, it could be a form of cheating. Fudging could also be considered a form of cheating. But we would not consider fudging to be dishonest. It is, in a sense, fraudulent. And it's completely unfair because it's at the whim of one person. But beyond its perfect form, the condition of cheating is that something bad. One cheats to win. So if you're fudging rolls to just make the story better for the players, it might be cheating, but it's for the betterment of players and betterment for the enjoyment of the game. And so we kind of liken this to Santa Claus. Is telling kids about Santa Claus lying? Yes. But most of the time it's for the betterment of the Christmas experience for the kids. So it's lying.
I will argue that it's not only just for the betterment of the kids. As a parent, I had a great time having my kids be excited about Santa Claus.
That's good. We'll talk about that in a minute. But yes, so fudging is in its base essence cheating, but it doesn't mean it's always wrong.
All right, so I see where we're going with this. Fudging is a good kind of cheating when it's done for everyone's benefit. But, Phil, is it ethical?
I'm no expert in ethics, and I'm possibly the least best person to discuss whether something is ethical or not, but I'm going to do it anyway. And it has a lot to do with, did everyone agree for it to happen? Like, Did everyone agree that fudging was okay? Because now we're getting into an area that I am pretty confident in, which is consent and expectations. If you don't tell your players that you're going to fudge the game from time to time, right? You're going to fudge the game to make it more enjoyable for everyone, right? And then you do so in the game, right? Without anyone knowing. I don't think that's ethical.
Yeah, you have to get agreement among the players that it's okay to select story over randomness. Otherwise, they're going to assume that everything is random, and that could affect their choices.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like some players could be disheartened to know that the game that they played was not the luck of the dice, right? The random experience that, that they thought like every roll that they made was, lucky when it was important and that kind of thing. And, you find out like, oh no, like I, nudge things here and there. Right. And those players could be like, oh, I didn't realize that. Right. So what we've talked about is like, you may need to use fudging. Right. So have this discussion, right? This drum, let me drag out this drum because we've pounded on this drum like 1,000 times. You can talk about this in session 0 if you're starting up a game, and you can talk about this in the middle of an ongoing campaign, right? Here's the thing. You can just ask, right? You can just ask your players and be like, hey, I like this game system, but from time to time, I may need to fudge things to just kind of keep everything going. Are we all cool with that? Like, are you guys cool if I do that? There's nothing taboo about asking. I feel like people don't ever talk about this. Like GMs do it. Like for the longest time, this was like the GM's dirty secret. Like GMs talk about it, and like, some do, some don't. There's like camps of people, but why? Like, just ask your players.
Yeah.
Right. If your players feel about story the way you feel about story, they're probably going to agree with you. Right. They'll be like, sure, we love a good story. And yeah, we would have been pretty sad if the big bad guy got capped in the first round of combat. Like, so you can have this conversation up front. There's nothing like taboo about this. Now, if you do have the conversation and everybody's on board with it, and it's like, yeah, you know what, if you got to fudge every now and then, like, do what you got to do, like make it, make the game good, make it good for all of us. You can decide then if, like as a group, do the players ever want to know about it?
There's a couple of different things. Maybe most players don't want to know about it at the time. Some players may just want to know after each session if things were fudged. Some might want to know only when the campaign's over, what worked and what didn't, what got fudged. And some players may never want to know. We don't want to know if you fudged it. We don't want to know if you didn't. We just want the game to go on. Yeah.
I mean, it's perfectly fine to say to the GM, like, hey, yes, we're fine if you use this. We're fine if you use this tool every now and then, but just don't tell us. Like, we're enjoying the mystique, right? Because the story that unfolds, I don't know, I'm of two minds of this. Like, I as a GM will always tell you, if you ask, how things unfolded. Like sometimes players will say to me like, oh, I bet you didn't see that, that thing coming. Right. And sometimes I'll be like, you're absolutely right. Like I scrambled in the background. I did this, this, and this. And people will be like, cool. Right. Like they appreciate finding that out. Or sometimes I'll be like, no, I kind of thought it might go that way. And I kind of had it planned. They're like, oh, okay, interesting. Like, wow, I can't believe you anticipated that. Like, so I don't mind like pulling back the curtain and showing what's going on. But I'm also for just keeping the illusion. Like, if you don't want to know, I don't ever have to tell you. It'll just like, that'll just go down like with me because it's just a tool. It's a thing I do to like help make the game go. And it's a thing you agreed to. So now I feel okay about it. Yeah. Right. So you can discuss this, right? You can discuss this among your players. You can even limit it. You can have discussions about what types of fudging the players are comfortable with. There might be ones that like, instead of having carte blanche and saying, oh, you can fudge anything you want in the game, players may be like, I'd prefer if you didn't fudge certain things, but I'd be totally fine if you fudge these things.
Okay. keep going. You've already covered all that, so go ahead.
Oh, I was going to let you give some of those examples.
Oh, okay. So only hit rolls, but not damage, or vice versa. Sometimes players just want to say that DC rolls are fine, but don't adjust anything else. They might say it's okay to fudge dice when the combat would be anticlimactic, and a lot of times they're just going to make it carte blanche, whatever needs to be appropriate.
Oh, I see, because I said the word carte blanche. Yeah. I got you.
Yeah.
Yeah, but those examples are perfectly fine, right? Like, you know, players might be like, look, I don't really want you to fudge a whole lot of stuff, but like, if we're going to have like kind of, you know, like if we've just been building up to our fight with Baron Von Badass and we're about to drop him in the first half of the turn, yeah, like fudge that, like so that we can have some more fun with it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's a discussion. You can have this discussion with your players. And you know, the bottom line of this is that if you have this discussion, if you lay down some ground rules for it and you all consent to it, right? It's not cheating anymore. And it's not, and it is ethical, because at that point, it's just a GM tool. It's just a tool that you put into your toolbox and you use it when you need to use it.
Exactly. So if we decide to use fudging as a GM tool and our players are good with it, do we have any tips for how best to use it, Jerry?
Well, the most important rule is going to be that fudging should be done to make the story more exciting for the players. Let's go over that one more time. Fudging should be done so that the players are having a better and more exciting experience. You don't fudge for your own enjoyment as a GM. You don't fudge to make things more challenging because it amuses you. You fudge it because you want the players to have a better and more exciting experience. And we talked about this earlier. You never fudge the punish for players. That's just being a dick. If you really want to kill or harm your player characters, just drop drops on the characters and let them quit the game and go do something else, because this isn't the game for you or them. So, with that said, with the idea that we're going to fudge to make players have a better and more exciting experience, there's a list here. Here's a couple of places we can fudge. This is not an exhausted list, not an ordered list. It's just a bunch of ideas we came up with. So what's the first one, Phil?
Yeah, add hit points to a creature or turn a hit into a miss when a player is attacking it, so that the hit won't be an anticlimactic kill. That's an example we've used like all through this all through this session.
Second time is turn a player's miss into a hit. This is especially true when the tone of the player or the table is down, and you can just tell that we need to move things on. That's the example we had at the very beginning of the game, where the 15 shouldn't have hit, but it did because we've been trying it for 6 turns and nothing happened.
Yeah.
But sometimes you do this just because the player's having a bad night, and that hit's going to kind of give them a little boost they want.
Turn a failure into a success when failure would not be interesting. Now, I will argue 2 things on this. One, you could just hand wave that check. Right. Mm-hmm. You could just be like, don't even make this check. The other one is that some games, not all games, some games will tell you that it is not even a roll. Like, don't even make a roll unless the chance of failure is as interesting as the chance of success. Right. So some games have dealt with this in their own rules, but sometimes like you see this, like I'll tell you where this one comes into play a lot. Published adventures. Mm-hmm. Like sometimes you will just see a published adventure that will be like, oh, I know Bob knows this one because we played this in Pathfinder, where we were like exploring this this building, and all the doors were locked, but they were just like storerooms. Yeah, do you remember this? Yep. Like we spent like 15 minutes like making like lockpick checks and break down doors, and there was literally nothing in any of these rooms. Mm-hmm. And like, but why? Right? Like just either make the roll or like I say, hand wave that shit right out. Just be like, you spend the next 20 minutes breaking down doors. It's basically stock rooms. There's nothing important here.
Yep.
The next one's kind of similar to this, where you turn a failure into success when the failure would simply stop the progress of the game. Maybe you're in a room full of all locked doors, but you have to get through them to get the game going. You need to make that failure into a success of some sort, so they find a way to get through that door and keep the story going. Either change the difficulty level of it, or they fail at that. Let them all make a perception check, and whoever rolls highest finds a secret passage or a key or a secret door or something. But sometimes you have to fudge things because failing at the roll stops the game and you guys can't go any further.
That's
the
the instance that led to the creation of the gumshoe system.
Exactly.
Yes.
Because somebody didn't find a
Yeah.
clue and everything grinds to a halt.
Yeah, I mean, Robin Laws like outright admitted it, right? Like Gumshoe exactly addresses the problem of rolling for clues.
Yep.
Right. And this is a case, right, where this is a case where in regular, more traditional like binary pass fail systems, these things would happen, right? Like we've all had these cases where games have like ground to a halt because of a failed perception check or something like that. And the way that as a designer, Robin Laws addressed it was like just wrote a game system where like, well, that just doesn't happen. Right. And changed the nature of that game. But this is also where having success with a consequence is great, right? Because in just like your case, Jerry, like sometimes somebody just in bad adventure design writes the room full of locks, right? Like, and sometimes you're responsible for it. Like it's your bad adventure design, but sometimes it's like a published thing. So success with a consequence is great for these situations because it's like, yeah, you didn't pass that roll, so you want to take the success with a consequence? Most people are going to be like, yes, and be like, cool, you do this, but like when you pick the lock, we cut to another area, something else is unlocked as well, right? And just leave it ominous and keep going kind of thing. Okay, last one on our short list here of things you could change, right? Changing the outcome of a check in order to keep a player alive or the party alive. Like, for instance, the cleric rolls fairly, like the cleric just misses their paralysis save in the middle of a combat where there's one or more characters already down. If the cleric gets paralyzed, it's going to be a TPK, and you just don't want a TPK at the moment. So you let the cleric's paralysis check make it, and they can run and resurrect somebody or heal somebody.
That's right.
And keep the game going. Okay. So there's some ideas of places where you fudge. Listen, if you've been playing any games, you probably have fudged things. You probably have like 1,000 more of these. Okay. When you do fudge, our other advice is be subtle, right? One, you don't want to reveal to the players you're fudging, right? In order to maintain the illusion of the game.
Especially true if in your consent discussion, the players don't want to know when you're fudging.
Exactly. Right. So don't heavy hand it so that they're like, oh, did you just fudge that roll? Like nobody wants to know that. Second, when you do fudge, make your changes in small increments, right? Don't overdo anything. Stay closer to the actual mechanics of the game, right? Like, if the cleric rolls a 4 for their save, like they failed, right? But if they roll like a 14, right, and it was like a 16, like, or 15, like you can make that work.
Yeah.
Right. Like you can work in there. So don't overcorrect, right? Because you really should be like aiming for just nudging the game, right? Like don't jerk the wheel, so to speak, right? Like don't overcorrect and like go in like, this is like being in a skid in snow, right? Like don't jerk the wheel and go like just overcorrect the thing and go off in the other direction. You want to nudge this thing back into place, right? If you overcorrect, you run the risk of putting the game out of alignment in another place and then having to fudge it back into the back into like into line, and then you just like wind up like zigzagging, like having to fix this to put this out to fix this, and like soon your game is kind of getting out of your hands, right? Subtlety.
For example, let's say the players are fighting the big bad, a giant dragon. In the first turn, they do enough damage to almost kill the dragon, making it unlikely that in the next turn the creature is going to survive, and you feel this might be anticlimactic for them. So you decide to add back some of the hit points to extend the fight. You add another 200 hit points, turning it back to almost full health. And then the next turn, the player's luck goes horribly, and for the rest of the fight, they're missing more than hitting, and the nearly fully healed dragon now starts to stomp the party. You have to start fudging hit rolls or removing hit points to start weighing this thing down before it becomes another total TPK.
Yeah. Instead, with the nearly dead dragon, you can just tack like 50 more hit points onto it, right? Just like bump it to 50 and get it through the turn and see what happens the next round. And maybe you're going to just need to add a couple, like another 50 on after a turn or two, just to keep the combat going a bit. Or if all of a sudden the player's luck runs out, now they've only got to just wear down those last 50 hit points, right? It's not like they're facing down a nearly full healed dragon. They're just like, they're having a couple crap rolls. They're getting like, they're getting their butts kicked. And then one of them gets off like a crit and then bam, it's dead. Right. And like, oh man, that was great. Like we almost lost it there, until Bob got that critical and took it down.
I want to state, by the way, that once in a while, there's nothing wrong with the players taking out the big bad on round one. I've had that happen, and sometimes it leads to an absolutely iconic scene where the big bad gets up, makes their monologue, and the barbarian steps forward, and wham, dead bad guy. Everybody cheers.
It's good you mentioned that, because that segues us into this next segment. So go ahead and just lead us in.
I saw we've used that example of adding hit points and extending the combat, extending the combat, and I'll be honest, I often as a GM feel the opposite way. If the players do really well, I'm not going to fudge because they've earned that one. They've all done really well and they've planned and something goes off well, and none of them feel it's anticlimactic to suddenly have it done, but not every time. So yeah.
You've mentioned the most important part, right? It wouldn't feel anticlimactic for that moment. Yes.
Yep. And that's why it's important to know that fudging is not just straight mechanics. It's a skill and it's an art.
Yeah, it's an art to know when to nudge the game back into alignment, right? Truthfully, sometimes players need to fail, right? Sometimes they need to be stymied. Sometimes they need to have setbacks, right? Sometimes there needs to be consequences for failure. And knowing when to fudge and allow something to be a success versus when to let the players fail at something is a bit of an art. From a story perspective, we improve this through a deeper understanding of story pacing, story structure, right? Watch more movies, more TV, read more books, read more comics. Those kinds of media show us things like try-fail cycles, right? We try, we fail, we finally succeed. They show us what climactic battles look like. And Jerry's right? Like sometimes the coolest thing to have in the moment is just to one-shot the bad guy, right? The players are super low on hit points. They're really ragged. They finally make it there. The bad guy does his monologue, right? Looks really smug. And then wham, Bob hits him for 200 points and drops him right there on the floor. And as a GM, you might just be like, yep, that was good. Like that was good story and no need to fudge it, right? Other times it could be like the players have been like we've spent 3 years of this campaign to bring us to this moment. We are stepping through this portal for one last triumphant battle. Basically it's the whole night's adventure. Maybe you don't want to go out in the first round.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe the players are going to want to stick it out and actually play, through a few rounds of this.
Yeah.
Okay. So there is an art to knowing when to nudge things.
Mm-hmm. But it's also a skill. You need to be versed in the mechanics of your game. You need to understand what to nudge, how to nudge it, how much to nudge it. Do you add 50 hit points or 100 hit points? It's going to depend entirely on the mechanics of the game, levels of the characters, what they can do for damage, etc. And this just basically means you need to have some system mastery and have some skill in how to fudge things. And over time, your skills are going to get better. You're going to have those times that you overcompensate and have to compensate back. But there's also times that you need to kind of adjust for things and know when to make a save, not a save, and so on. Mm-hmm. And as long as we're here, we have a new person in the chat room, Riven. Riven was one of the players in the ill-fated when Jerry did a bad job of adjusting and had a beholder that TPK'd the whole party.
Oh, we've heard about the story about that beholder.
Yes, Riven was in that adventure.
Good times.
So he's also a paladin with the kobold we talked about earlier. Anyway.
Oh, very good.
Nice.
Bob?
All right, so before we head to break, there's one more thing that we should discuss. Phil, what about players fudging rolls?
Yeah.
Oh.
Right? It happens. Is it cheating? Probably. Is it unethical? Probably. Is it bad? Might depend. Right? The most common way a player fudges a roll is by giving a different outcome from the die they rolled. The second most common way is to either forget to remove a bonus or add your bonus that may not apply to the situation and just bump up that roll, right? Like you leave the 14 on the table, but you have a +9, not a +5.
Yeah.
When you finish off your math. Look, players fudge rolls for the same reasons GMs do, right? They believe their character should be able to do a thing in the story that the mechanics say otherwise. And again, greatly reduced when there's a mechanism in a game that allows players rerolls, bonuses, things like that, right? Things like bennies. The Cypher XP is a great one. The Cypher XP is a great one because it's not even a reroll. It's a whole decision you have to make about, do I want to make this reroll or do I want to get closer to advancing my character?
Yep.
Fate points, aspects. You know what? Even DCC, right? As random as DCC is luck.
Yep.
Only for players, though.
Yep.
Right? Not for like the GMs, like on their own, but players have it's not a actually there's actually a variant called fleeting luck where like we've played with traditional luck, which is like, look, you have a finite amount that you rolled when you rolled your character. When it's out. Fleeting luck is actually more like bennies, where you give them to players and they can spend them like one for one, changing the rolls. But when games have those things, players are less likely to fudge their own dice, right? Because they can choose to make the reroll. Plus, if you declare that you're making the reroll and you fail again, like everybody sees it, right?
That's right.
But you also feel empowered because you're like, oh, I rolled and it didn't work. I'm going to spend a point. Oh, I failed again. I guess I'm not meant to make this roll. Right? And then you just like, okay, I'll live with it. Okay. But in all these cases, right, the player doesn't like the outcome. They spend the resource, they try again. It helps. Okay.
Now, sometimes players fudge a roll because it's something a little bit more personal. They might be feeling bad. They might be just having a bad day. And failure is just not making the game fun. Now, I'm going to be clear about some things. Failure is a part of all games, and players should be comfortable and accepting of a certain amount of failure. You're not going to succeed at every die roll. But there are times when players are just in a darker mental space where additional frustration and failure only makes them feel worse. And one could argue that maybe it's not a good night to be gaming, and that could be true in some cases. But a lot of people also have trouble bailing on a game and letting their friends down when they're not feeling well, and that can add to that feeling. So, because of that, sometimes a player just needs to win, and they might fudge something like a hit roll or a check just to not fail, to get that win. While players can do this, this is another point where the GM can try to spot this and do it on their behalf and make it better. Also, if you have player resources that allow rerolls, this will help to make this a lot easier.
Yep.
And as a GM, again, this is a time when if you see a player who's having that kind of a night, this is when you want to be much freer with your bennies, your gimme points or whatever. Give them out often and frequently and bring the mood of the table up.
Yeah.
I've seen lots of nights where somebody who's having a bad day that just what happens at the table gives them the boost, the confidence to kind of make it through to their next therapy session. And I'm not saying that sarcastically. I mean, literally, that was the boost they needed between those nights, and that makes a difference.
Yep.
But that's part of being a group.
And you're 100% right? Like some nights, I mean, I've seen it in, I've made this joke about Savage Worlds before, right? If you want to see the tone of a table change, right? Have somebody spend their last penny, right? Like all of a sudden things become a lot more like it was super heroic. And then you spent your last penny and now this game is grim, right? Like you are at the mercy of these dice and you are like, no, I'm not jumping over to the other stagecoach, Jerry. Like I'll just climb inside now where it's safe. Right. And where, look, for better, for worse, right? If you go the Shine Tar route and just start pumping them out like an arcade game, the table gets hot, right? People get excited. You got bennies to spend. I'll do some stupid shit if I can keep re-rolling, right? Like,
I'll tell you, one of these days, I'd love to see you play a Savage Worlds game with our friend Sean, because Sean will burn all his bennies trying to succeed at a group roll that's already been succeeded at. It is not unusual for Sean to be out of bennies 25 minutes into a 6-hour Savage Worlds game.
Oh boy!
And then he just plays it like he stole it. He does not. That does not stop him from doing.
That's brave.
Things.
I commend. I am a cautious player, so like I have like a Benny limit. Like I'm like, okay, I have 4 bennies. 2 of these bennies have to be for soak rolls. These 2 bennies can be for re-rolls for other shit. But like I'm gonna hold like. And now if I'm starting to, like, if I'm getting close to 2 bennies, I'm going to have to like trigger some shit here to get some more bennies. Right. Like I do this with Cypher too. Right. As soon as I get 4 XP in Cypher, I like put them to the side. Like I'm going to get an advancement tonight. I'm not re-rolling anything. I'll just like, I'll let fate be like what it is. And then if I get more XP over the 4, I'm like, okay, now like I'll re-roll some shit now. Like,
yeah.
Okay. So, here's the thing, right? We could have this discussion in session 0, right? We could talk about whether it's acceptable behavior or not. I don't think we ever do, right? I know I have never addressed my players to be like, by the way, if you need to cheat tonight, like, or fudge a roll, feel free. But I will say this, right? Here's a couple of things I've done where I have subtly made this point. When we play online, I don't tell you that you have to use the die roll. Right. I'm like, we're all adults here. Roll your dice. Like, it's fine. Whatever. If you need that win and you need to just tell me a different number, that's fine. The other thing is I don't check your dice ever. I don't ever as a GM. I will just say this. I don't ever as a GM ever check to see what players roll. I used to, right? I definitely used to. I used to look. I just like at this point now, I don't care. If you're not fudging your rolls to make everybody else look bad, harm other players. Like if you're not doing anything harmful at the table and you just like, I don't know, you had a shitty day, you need a win, like you just need to get that hit, you don't want to miss again. I'm not like,
I feel
I'm not getting on your case about it. We're adults.
I used to be just like you. And I used to watch the players, watch their dice, want to see what they were rolling, you know, is the die on its side? Is it a cocked die or not? Now I'm just like, what'd you get? You did whatever. Read whichever one's up. You get to the point where we should all be playing with friends. Unless at a con, we should all be playing with friends. And if whatever they're doing is having fun and the rest of the players are having a good time with it, go for it.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I've even, and especially now that we play games like Dungeon World and stuff, I have caught players deliberately failing dice rolls just because it's going to be interesting.
Yep.
I almost want to make a house rule for Dungeon World, which is like, if you just want to take the 6- on a roll, just tell me, right? Like you can't do it every turn, but like once or twice a session, if you want to just be like, I failed this roll, I'll take my experience point.
We've had moments in games with Tony that were not PBTA even, where Tony just like, I feel like failure in this instance is the optimal thing for us. like my character is going to fail this because it's going to be way more interesting.
Yeah, Tony.
I've done that a couple times in some of our Savage Sundays games where it's not a combat roll, where the GM's like, all right, roll your resistance or roll whatever. I'm like, I just fail. I want to see what happens next. I fail. Like, now that's always fun when you get a GM who's not expecting that. But it could be a lot of fun either way. So it can be fun.
Jerry, give us a few tips if you're a player and you need to fudge a roll. What are like a few things you should do?
First of all, do it infrequently. You should accept failure in the games you're playing. If you're going to be fudging the dice constantly so you always succeed, you probably don't need to play this game. You should probably go do something like a video game or something on that line. So you should save your fudging for when things get desperate or interesting. And like DM fudging, be subtle. Just nudge things a few points. If you rolled a 14, don't tell somebody you rolled a 20. I got a 15, whatever. If you're going to go do dice rolls, make sure people don't see your dice. You'll roll them quickly. Do what we used to call the Warhammer sweep. When I used to run Warhammer tournaments, we always had the players, always from Rochester, who would roll their dice, count their hits, and then scoop their dice up before anybody else could count them. We used to call it the Warhammer sweep.
Yep.
By the way, do not cheat in tabletop board games and war games. That's wrong. And lastly, maintain the illusion. Just keep it kind of looking there. Have a good time with it. Keep it quick, keep it subtle, and don't make it obvious.
Yeah.
So,
All right, cool. That is the first half of our topic. I can't even say half, right? It's our first 2/3 of our topic or segment, the first segment on our with our overview of fudging. We're going to head to the chat room. We're going to check in with them, get their thoughts. But first, Bob, tell us about another show on the Misdirected Mark Network.
Yeah, so Doc Palindrome has a little show called The Lounge, where he finds the best, the brightest, and the most fun game designers and sits down to have a cool chat with them. You never know what kind of conversation is going to come up in an episode of The Lounge. Check it out.
That's right.
All right, so Chatteroo. Way back a little bit, Chromatic Chameleon said they often do their best to plot fudge because they want the big bad to have a logical reason to have power up and tactics that might match the PCs, etc. So that's a good place to do it. I like plot fudge. Plot fudge sounds good.
Sure.
Yeah. Optional fudge.
Yeah.
Where you've got stuff set aside where you decide, okay, depending on how the players go, I'm going to have this option or this option or this option, so that it's challenging for them as they go. And also the mood of the room,
Yeah.
we've got they want to wrap this game up and we've got half an hour left to play this thing. Let's see how it goes. That's a really good idea.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, Lemming spoke just to that. I think I've only had one GM where I started fudging only so we could move the story along, move the combat along, because people had to get up early for work or whatever. Like sometimes it's just, let's make this thing roll.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you want to keep things moving. Yeah. We have a new person in the chat room. That's Riven311, who is one of my old gamers, as I mentioned, from back in the Syracuse days. The stories you hear me tell about, playing a lot of 3.5, the big epic games with the unkillable kobold, and he was one of the playtesters / gamers that was through all of my Metal Fire fantasy games that I ran, and always played unusual characters that played against type, and had a really good time with that. But yes, he was also famous for having absolutely horrible dice rolls and living with almost all of them. Not roll a d6 to save his life sometimes.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I've seen games we had in our one night in our Pathfinder game. Phil was rolling so poorly that he started keeping a tally of how many rolls were under 11. And like the statistical probability of the crappy rolls he was making was a total anomaly. But that's
I did all the superstitious stuff. I swapped out dice. I put all my dice on 20, right, to warm. We used to have, what was it, the computer?
Yep.
We would roll 2 dice. Only one of them ever counted. It was just that the other one was there to create healthy competition for the other D20. Like we could do. I think we could probably do a whole show on dice superstition.
Yeah. All right.
Oh, it's. I'll give Riven one more thing. He was also almost always somebody who lived and died by the bad dice rolls. If he rolled absolutely horribly, it was never a oh crap or a mad or whatever. It was like, okay, in the days before, they're talking back in 3.5 days, how can we make this interesting? And that's what we did. Can I just take a broken arm for that? There's no rules for it, but sure, go ahead. So
see, that's a good attitude.
Yeah, that's a very good attitude.
All right. So let's complete our segment on fudging by heading to the round table. We're only going to do 2 questions because this was a pretty beefy topic with a lot of discussion. So question number 1, have you as a GM ever fudged a die during a game and was it memorable, or what was memorable about it?
Well, I would say that I often, especially in the non-binary days, and especially in the old days of D&D, fudge dice rolls. I think that in the old days, I'm actually guilty of doing some of the malicious GM stuff too, because I was even more of a dick back then than I am today. But back when I was doing things like, especially Pathfinder, early Pathfinder, we had a hit from a monster became a miss, or I had them roll less damage. They're supposed to roll 3d10, and I had them roll 3d6. or I chop their hit points down a little bit because it's been 6 turns and I can tell that nobody's enjoying this fight. But I did a lot, especially my first run through Pathfinder, because I thought I was an experienced 3.5 GM. And while Pathfinder is very similar to that, some of the things changed drastically, and some of the monsters were different. And especially some of the adventure paths, while they're really well written, some of the big bad evil guy fights are pretty tough, especially if the party doesn't have a standard allotment of character types. And that's another time you might have to fudge if you're running a pre-generated module, and that module assumes, 4 to 6 characters, including, fighter, wizard, cleric, and rogue, and you've got, bard, druid, and, juggler. It's going to be a different encounter at the end of that game. And sometimes you need to fudge it just because, the players don't have that thing that the designer obviously had in mind for when they did that. So I fudged them a couple times, quite a bit during the early runs of Pathfinder. But I did it for the reasons I wanted the story to go forward. How about you, Phil?
Yeah, I mean, back in the D20 days, right? I mean, even before the D20 days, but like especially in the D20 days, I fudged lots of things, right? I would fudge hit rolls here and there. I fudged grapple checks, like whatever. Like I fudged what I needed to like kind of move the story along. And I did because and the way I know I did was because I rolled behind my screen, right? For a lot of my games, I rolled behind the screen so that I could then make adjustments as necessary, right? I don't do that with games that I play today, because most of the games I play have those support systems in it, Cypher, Fate, those PBTA, right? If I roll anything, I roll that stuff in the open. When we play DCC, I roll all my shit in the open for that, because for DCC, I'm just like, this is the game where I just let the chips fall.
Yeah.
I don't care. Like, I don't care like what happens. You want to, like, you kill the big bad in one shot, I'm in. Right.
That game
like,
has a certain feel to it, and that's like, that's perfect.
Yeah, just embrace for DCC, I embrace randomness.
Yeah.
But for games like and those other games like Fate and Cypher and stuff, like I roll out in the open. Like, you'll know, like, I mean, I roll the -1 more times in Fate than anyone has ever rolled. That's minus. Like, I've rolled more -1s than Fred Hicks. That's what I will say. My most memorable fudging, and it wasn't actually a roll. I actually bent my own rule and needed to very quickly. So in my final battle of my Iron Heroes campaign, I knew that the players were going to do a metric fuck ton of damage in this battle. And I purposely made the bad guy based on all of the players' stats. Like, I took everybody's character sheets and I sat down and I was like, what armor class do I need to have so that these guys hit 50%, 60% of the time? And I built the bad guy for that. But I also knew there was no way I could give the bad guy enough hit points. So I had these obelisks that had energy in them. And I had written it into the story that, like, he could take like so much from each obelisk a turn to like buff up his hit points. And it wasn't a huge number, but if the obelisk ran out of power, then the obelisk was dead. And that was important because the obelisks he was trying to charge them up to cast this ritual to let the real horrors back into the world. Well, the players roll into this battle and they hit this guy so hard in the first turn that I look at my rules and I'm like, nope, I got to take a shitload of points back out of these obelisks right now. Like, I was like, this battle will be over in, like, I think I had it figured out after the first round. I was like, if they have another round like this battle won't go 3 turns. Like, I need them to have enough hit points to last long enough. So I transferred a bunch of points out into them to survive the first turn. Because when they came out of the portal, because they came through this portal, when they came out of the portal, they came out guns blazing, right? Like, they had 2 weeks to prepare their first round of combat, and it was devastating. And Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, I did not pull any more points for the rest of the battle. I just kept him alive through that first turn, and then everybody rolls settled out. And I kept it going. But man, in that first 10 minutes of that session, I was like, oh shit, man, he's not gonna make it.
And that was one of those instances where this entire campaign was building to this fight. And this fight was the session. Yeah. So if we had pounded him in the first round and he had just gone down, it would have been a huge bummer. We would have been disappointed.
And we still tell the story.
Yeah.
And there's a case where I did not fudge a roll, right? I rolled his strength check, and I remember because I showed you the die roll, because I was like, he failed, right, man? I lifted up the screen. I was like, look, he failed. It was, but it was a thing where I knew this was a 2+ year campaign. The whole session was being dedicated to this battle because this was 18th level D20 combat.
Yep.
So this was 4 hours of combat.
Yeah.
And I knew that if you guys killed him in the first turn, yes, it would be satisfying, but was it going to be the best story?
No.
Yeah. So when he fell and you knocked, when he ran into you and fell over, something that numerically was almost impossible to do. That's in my mind. I was like, oh, this is it.
This is the moment.
This is the moment. He's prone. Their special abilities are going to kick in. I'm like, oh, this shit's going to happen. And I just sat back and let the rest of it play.
If he had gone down in that first round. So, that was perfect. So I routinely fudged when I was GMing my 4E campaign.
Sure.
Because my players were a well-oiled tactical machine. I would basically it was like throwing monsters into a meat grinder. And so I would routinely just fudge this guy, he should be dead, but he's got full hit points still, whatever. I fudged a lot just so that they would have some of their combat stretch out a little bit longer. They were in no way being disappointed by the impact that my fudging had. It was just it was tactical decision making, just to make the combats more interesting, because there's a benefit to rolling into a room with a whole bunch of bad guys and crushing the living shit out of them in the first round and being like, yeah, we rock, we're awesome. Mm-hmm. But if you do it every single time, it starts to get boring. And these guys were that good that they just knew exactly how to hit a room, regardless of what the opponent was and regardless of volume, whatever. And they were just that good. So I was throwing numbers all over the place.
It didn't help that one of the rules in 4E was that at each level you could swap powers out. So very quickly we were this power, this one isn't doing it. I'm swapping it out for this one. And we would sit as players and be like, okay, that power you just got, if we hook that up with my power that holds everybody in place. Oh yeah. We would we were holy terrors on Bob's campaign, and I appreciated that in the early rooms of the dungeon, we would just walk in and just waste everything in the room, right? Remember I what was it, that second adventure, our brothers will yes your brothers will
we know
us. Yes, we know. And then we got to the big baddie and we hit everything and it's still standing and we were like, oh, a challenge, right? We got all excited about it. So yeah, it's another case where absolutely, would I have wanted to know in the moment? No. Am I happy that you did that behind the scenes? Absolutely. I had a blast. I loved those 4E combats.
Those were some of the most entertaining sessions of D20 gaming that I've been in. And it was a joy to run those games for that group until I burned out. But but that wasn't because of them.
It was fun. It was fun stuff. I still have fond memories. People say what they want to about 4E. There's a part of 4E I thoroughly enjoyed.
Yeah. All right. Moving on to the second and last question. As a player, have you ever fudged a die roll during a game, and why?
Oh, totally. Totally. Right. I'll answer first. I totally have. It like primarily during all my D20 games. Again, especially in those D20 games, because there was like, you were just at the whim. There was no way to re-roll anything. Everything was pass fail. Like occasionally I would just like, I very rarely fudged the die roll. I very often tinkered with the bonus math. Like if I was going to fudge a roll, it would be more like I quote forgot that I shouldn't have that bonus when I did, or I'm bad at math, right? Which just like add it wrong. And just let it ride. But with other games, like if we're playing like things like Fate, if we're playing anything powered by the apocalypse, I like let the dice fall where they may, right? Like I think I had a night of PBTA when we were playing Airy Peaks, where I think I failed almost every roll that night. Like every time Chris said roll, I rolled a 6-. And it was fine because Chris was in control of the game, kept the game moving. I took my lumps that night. But also, I got to say this for Dungeon World. Coupling experience points with failed rolls, I was like, well, I didn't pass a roll tonight, but I'm leveling up.
Yep.
Like I was like, I'm okay. Like
that's a huge factor in mitigating the negative feelings from having bad rolls. Yeah. You sit there and you go, oh, I rolled poorly again. Oh, I rolled poorly again. One, those poor rolls are making for interesting actions and results because of the way the game is built. And two, you leveled up. So you've got that offset when the old school pass-fail binary stuff just didn't have that, and it's just like,
And in all honesty, if I had just failed those rolls and just taken hit points of damage, it would not have been nearly as interesting as the shit Chris did to that character that night. Like, dropped me through pits, slid, like, fell through things, separated from every, like, he had to use, like, every move in the book because I couldn't pass a roll. But it was just great. Like, it just got worse and worse all night until it finally, like, everybody else overcame the problem. And I was like, sorry, I wasn't helping. Like, I'm going to go level up now.
But it was fun.
Yeah, it was fun.
Capital fun.
Yep. Which is why, like, PBTA is almost always one of my go-to systems. How about you, Jer?
All right. I know I did, especially back in the old days. Back in the 70s and 80s era games, I played a lot of games that devolved into PvP.
Oh yeah,
and not often over silly stuff. I mean, we had a nearly total party kill that involved the players getting into an argument where one person threw an anvil at somebody else during breakfast, and the party split in half, and it just got vicious. Not only was it vicious. It was vicious, and we were playing Roll Master.
So not Tune?
Oh no!
Because Tune is exactly where you throw an anvil at somebody.
No, this was the party had been split because half of us, I'm going to say, accidentally burnt a city to the ground, and the other half of the party had been hired to come get us. They finally caught up with us, and we kind of got things smoothed out. We sat down in a ruined inn to have breakfast, and just as we were eating, one of the fighters picked up an anvil and dropped it and threw it at one of the other fighters, and combat ensued. This was a game where we had like 11 players, and I was the only spellcaster. Everybody else was a fighter variant. And so you had to fudge your dice rolls because it was just brutal combat. And, the big thing we used to do, because this is in the days before Decatur dice, you'd roll 2d10s, and, I read, you roll an 8 and a 6, and oh, that's an 86, and the next time, well, that's a 68, that sort of thing. So We did that. But to be honest, most of the time it was just games with bonuses. And a lot of times it comes down to literally unconsciously forgetting to add or subtract a point from something. 17. Okay, wait. Was I supposed to still add that +2 on there? And most GMs will just go, it doesn't matter. You hit. But yeah, it's something we try not to do that anymore. And I also don't play PvP games anymore either.
No,
yeah.
And I think a lot of it has to do with that idea, right? Like, I don't play games where I feel like I have to fudge rolls anymore, because it's not that I don't really want to fudge rolls. Not that I think there's anything wrong with it, right? It's a tool like everything we've been saying. I prefer if the game just has mechanisms that I can engage to do that work, right? Mm-hmm. Rather than me. I mean, I'm duct taping it when I'm fudging, right? Like I'm like, I gotta fix the game, right? Like break out the duct tape. I'd rather the game just have the mechanisms I need to smooth the game over as I'm playing.
Yeah, that's the ideal scenario.
For me, it is, right?
Yeah.
For other people, maybe it's different, but for me, I'm polygamerous, right? So I'll just go play another game. Yeah. But there are people. Look, I mean, there are a lot of people in the hobby who are like, I'm ride or die on this one edition of this game, or I'm 5e and that's it, right? Like, look, if you are, maybe you're gonna have to fudge some stuff.
Maybe.
And I'll be honest, there's a lot you can do to. And we've talked about this before. There's a middle ground. You can take a game like 5e, and you can add things like luck points from Eberron, or what do they call it? Well, hero points from Eberron. Yep. Or you can do things the way that Gaming and BS.
Yeah.
Streets of Avalon.
Yeah.
Yep. Where he talks about how to use, how to turn the D20 into a non-binary system. Still keep the game together. Just a failure isn't always a failure. You can find that middle ground somewhere, and it works.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes my thing I have to do with games that are like that is I'll reframe checks.
Yep.
Yes.
So it won't be like, did you pick the lock? I'll reframe it to be like, did you pick the lock before the guard found you?
Exactly.
Yep.
That subtle change is enough to make that 100% better.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I like games that. So again, I know me, and I know me now long enough that if I pick up a rule book, I can flip through a rule book and pretty much know, like, oh, I'm comfortable with this system. Yeah. Oh, I'm probably not going to enjoy running this system.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. I just I know, like, it's the same way I know when I see a movie trailer if I'm going to be like, oh, I'm going to like this movie. Right? Like, do I see the things in it that I know were going to give me like good feelings and confidence, that it's going to be good? Like, does it have a Marvel logo? Right?
Yeah. Then I'm probably going to be good. Yeah.
I'm probably going to like it. Right. But the same thing's true. Like, if I pick up your role-playing game, and I do this all the time when I either buy games, sometimes I just buy a game because I'm curious. Sometimes like, I'll see a game in a store and I'll open it up. I go right to that. Like, I go right to the task resolution section. I start looking.
Yep.
Like, do we got fail with consequence? Do we got reroll mechanics here? Do we like, and if I don't see those things, I'm like, probably not going to like this game.
Yeah.
All right. Yep. To wrap up this question, I will say that I have definitely, as a player, fudged rolls. Again, this goes back to the discussions we had earlier. You have one of those nights where it's like, I keep missing. Like, I had a night, I don't remember what game it was. It was a D20 game, and I was literally off by like 1 or 2 points every freaking roll. Missed it by 1, missed it by 1, missed it by 2, missed it by 1, missed it by 2. And finally, I'm just like, got him, finally. No, I didn't, but I did. Because I had to, because it was just crushing me.
Yeah.
And it's like, if there had been some kind of mitigation mechanic in the game, clearly I would have used it. But
yeah, if you could have just spent a point or two, right? Like,
I'm going to take this and
bump
it up.
The truth is, sometimes you just like, if in a string of misses, if you get one hit and then you miss again, you're like, okay, I'm fine.
Yeah, as long as you're not consistently bam, 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 miss, miss. Yeah, that one hit is enough to offset a lot of negativity. So yeah, been there, done that, got the t-shirt. So
Yep.
And
All
that is our show on fudging, which I'm sure there's going to be all kinds of comments about.
Right. Yeah. Look, we hope that should you need to employ this tool in your game, that the advice we have provided will be of some sort of help for you.
Mm-hmm. All right. And now we're going to check the chat room one more time before getting the conversation corner.
Yeah. So yeah, they our friends in the chat have been right along with us for the most part on all of this. Andi had like the opposite experience with 4E that I did. 4E combat dragged on and on and on, which is unfortunate.
That was my experience. That was my experience too when I played it.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Like I had the perfect storm of players with synergy to each other in the way they play, tactical mindedness, character choices with build choices that created synergy. Like it was just the perfect storm. So they were a joy to run for because it was entertaining as hell. But
and
not everybody
we worked pretty hard at like, how do our powers work together? Like we all got it pretty quick. Like, oh, cool, we have powers, they do things. And then like the second conversation we had was like, hey, if we combine your power and your power, then like our ranger was like, and I'm on the periphery shooting shots, and it's like,
and you have my bow.
Like the worst thing that could happen to us in a 4E game was a solo monster.
Yeah. If
there was one monster that we could concentrate fire on, it was bad for that monster. That's where Bob's like miraculous hit points came from.
Yeah.
If we had to split up and fight things, it was definitely more dicey. Although until Tom got that power that rearranged the battlefield, and then no matter what you did, we would just put the battlefield together the way we wanted it.
There were 2 wizard powers that Tom had. One was, I'm going to rearrange the location of people on the battle mat, which was brutal.
That's
because
brutal
all of a sudden all the matchups were changed. And then there was that one where he could literally pick up a monster and just like bash it against it. It wasn't telekinesis, but there was something about the power that basically he just like would lift the monster up, like bash it against the ceiling and the floor 100 times or whatever, and just knock the crap out of it. And he did that to a dragon in the one room, and it was just like, oh, that's gonna leave a mark.
Yep.
So yeah, good times. Chromatic Chameleon said, as a player, they fudged life and death situations that were unfair feeling, which absolutely. Those are the ones, if it feels completely unfair, and especially if somebody's life is on the line, you're going to be like, should I tweak this number? You get the little devil and angel on your shoulders going, fudge the number, fudge the number, fudge the number. You shouldn't do that. It's unethical. No, fuck that. Fudge the number. All right.
It's true.
All right. So we're going to roll that over into our conversation corner here.
Conversation corner.
We did a lot better with that giant beefy text of 15 pages than I thought we would. I thought for sure we would be like long. But
that was good. When we have those talks about like, speeding up the beginning of the show, we move pretty quick.
Yep.
All right. So for me, this past week, pretty much all the things that I've been watching, same as it ever was. I won't even list them all off again. It's a lot of the stuff is the same stuff that everybody's going to talk about after me. I have not been getting a hell of a lot done around my condo. I still have a ton of stuff that just needs to get done. Things unpacked, put away, organized, whatever. And I just haven't been doing it. Am I super concerned yet? No. If I get partway into the winter and I'm still in the same boat, then I might be like, oh, I got to really crack down. But it is what it is. Playing lots of Valheim and watching a lot of football because it's football season. So I have been just kind of plodding along. I will say again, though, that from a storytelling standpoint, Kipo and the Age of Wonder Beasts just like whoever was the writers on that just did a fine job. I've only got like 2 or 3 episodes left before it's over. And I'm like, oh, please tell me that there's plans for more down the road, because I would love to see some more of it. But yeah, Kipo, so good. After that, I got to start looking at a new short form lunch show to watch. I want to take Elementary and bring it out and put it on my list, but that's an hour long, 7 seasons. That's going to be one of those ones where I have to kill a couple of episodes on the weekend or whatever. But but I will need some kind of short form show. So I got to start looking and see what's out there on Netflix and whatnot.
Now, have you seen Elementary before?
I have seen literally 1 episode from start to finish of Elementary, and it was,
oh my God,
it was like I was like, wow, this is really good. But at the time, with everything else that I was watching, I was like, I can't fold this into the mix.
It's quite enjoyable.
But yeah, it's and tons of people have gone and raved about that show. So, but yeah, the 1 episode I watched, I'm like, this scratches my Sherlock Holmes itch, because I do really like the whole Sherlock Holmes thing. I've read every story that Doyle wrote. I've read things that other people have written that were based on the character. And I've seen like a bunch of the different movies and different takes on the character. So yeah, this, I'm very much looking forward to getting this, because Johnny Lee Miller does a really good modern Holmes. So definitely gonna make that on my list.
I mean, you say that, but I can't let you finish the sentence without saying, and Watson.
And yes. Watson, yes.
Lucy Lou's Watson
Lou's Watson, yes.
That's what sold me on it, because I've said this before. Up until that point, I'd only seen Lucy Liu playing the same damn character in everything that they cast her in, and I thought she was a one-note actress. And then I saw the first episode of Elementary, and I was like, well, fuck. Now I know what I'm going to... And then I think I watched 7 episodes that first night. I was up till like 3 a.m. watching Elementary and playing Facebook or Minecraft.
Yeah.
And oh my God, it was just... she is as good as he is in that show, and he's amazing. It's such a well-done show.
They're both fantastic. The other actors that they have, the whole cast is really top notch. I really liked the cast, the NYPD cast, and but I will say that I have to say this, because I can't let it pass. Like, so Lucy Liu's fantastic, but also the clothes. Like, wait till you see like yes. Like Lucy Liu is like the most New York Holmes you have ever seen. Like, her fashion sense is top notch.
Yeah.
Anyway, I highly recommend it. Even if you watch halves, at lunch, and watch them, over 2 days, like it won't be terrible. You won't be sad about it.
All right. Well, that's enough for me. What about you, Jerry?
Well, Legos, of course. I've been building lots of little sets that I've got sitting around the house. So I've just been, that's kind of something that I do to just kind of de-stress. So I'm getting a lot of boxes emptied, because I don't keep Lego boxes for anything that was released after like 1985. So I will open up a Lego box and just toss it. So I'm getting more space in the house and getting things organized. But I've just been building campers, and it's weird. I'm not actually a big fan of actual camping. I did it a lot when I was a child, and I was also an Eagle Scout. So I did a lot of camping, but I'm fascinated by campers. I don't know why, but same thing as I'm not a big boat person. As far as actually, like, if you told me, let's go out on a boat and go sailing for an entire day, I would find that boring after about the first hour. But I have like 30 Lego boats, and I'll build them. So I've just been building Lego sets and having a good time. A lot of the sets are small. I can build them in an hour or two. I mean, just before the show started, I was building the Batman 66 Batmobile, which is my favorite Batmobile. But I've just been doing that. And I strongly recommend Legos to anybody who just needs to de-stress at the end of the day. Lower Decks was great, but I'm going to leave that for Phil. What If was great. I'm going to leave that for Phil. I'm catching up on Disco. I think I'm up to episode 7 or 8 of season 3. And it's been season 3 has been a roller coaster ride of interesting characters, so I'm having a good time with it. Two things. Valheim, Bob and I have been having a really good time. We got to use our famous catchphrase, which was, going over there would be stupid. Let's do it. And we have died a lot doing stupid things in the last week and had a good time doing it. Though if you get on Mumble when Bob and I are playing Valheim, you may hear some new and creative uses of various expletives all over the place. There's a lot of swearing.
Once in a while, I tend to go off.
Bob, if you're looking for a half-hour show to watch, I would strongly recommend, because I started watching it just I wanted something in the background, Arrested Development. It's a fun show. It's half-hour long.
I watched some of it when it first came out, and it just didn't do anything for me.
Did you have you watched Schitt's Creek?
Schitt's Creek, on the other hand, that one I may have to.
Schitt's Creek's very funny.
I've heard good stuff about Schitt's Creek.
That's a very funny show.
And Community and Parks and Rec.
Yeah, both.
Oh my God,
funny.
Parks and Rec, I had a tough time with. I watched the first. I'm sure it gets better in later seasons because I've seen clips. The first couple episodes did not suck me in, and I'm wondering if I just have to like skip like the first half 7 or 8 episodes and then jump into the show. But yeah, Community had me by like episode 2 or 3. I think you will like Community, Bob. I would strongly recommend Community. So, all right, that's it for me. Phil?
Yeah. So what if was fantastic. Takes a turn I wasn't expecting for What If. But damn, it was cool. No spoilers.
Yeah.
But I will never see the Watcher the same way again.
Yeah.
And there's definitely a meme that has been born out of that episode.
Yeah.
There's a meme that has been birthed from the What If episode. So with the Watcher, with a line from the Watcher, it's very good. Lower Decks was fucking hilarious. Again, no spoilers, but the training regiment was like every one of them was from another episode of Star Trek somewhere. It was absolutely hilarious. I think out of all of them, I think the medical one, Tandy's, was probably my favorite one. I snort laughed when I saw that scenario.
Yeah.
Rutherford's was good, and of course, the people who are like already bent about that are already bent about Lower Decks, like lost their shit over the.
I saw a mouth breather on Twitter that was complaining they need to change the name of the show to something else because there's no story, there's no plot. It's just a bunch of call outs, and it's like, no, you're not watching, you're not paying attention.
The
there's definitely
the mess hall scene is the one that like the mouth breathers have lost their minds over, especially the Boimler pick. And that's all I'll say is hilarious, absolutely hilarious. That's really good. Last Ship, I'm cruising through. I'm almost done with season 2. Boy, I like this show. It's a little tense. Sometimes I got to watch just a little of it and then put it down. It is definitely its own Twilight 2000 adventure. Like I'm like watching it, I'm like, oh, I could take Twilight 2000 and totally run this game. Like they're basically like they're the last ship and they're like cruising around trying to give out the cure, and they came up with a really cool twist in the second season that there were these people that are naturally immune from the virus and they don't want anyone to get better because they think they're superior to everybody. And it's like and there's this character lamenting, and it's like, I thought we'd be, in the ship driving around with the cure and everyone would be excited to take it. And there's all these people that don't want anyone to have it or take it. And I'm like, sister, you don't even know. like, man, the show was made like in the early 2000s. Like, you don't even know. Like, that happened in real life and people are turning down the cure. Like, whatever. But it is good. It's good action. I've been reading more of Cortex Prime. Very interesting game. I like the mechanics. I'm fascinated with this toolbox idea that you like. This is not a game that you play by reading the book. This is a game you have to build out of the parts that are in the book. And every core, you can make like 1 million Cortex Prime games out of this toolkit. Very interested. It's a very nice intersection of I would like to do a little game design, but I don't want to design a game. Like, I think I will build a Cortex Prime game. So that'll be fun. And I very much have a preliminary concept called Crash World that I'm messing around with, that I will probably for fun put together as a Cortex Prime game at some point.
Okay, here's my $100 question I ask whenever somebody has a toolbox. How easy would it be to run Star Frontiers?
Well, let me not say easy. Can this game run Star Frontiers? Without a doubt. Are you going to have to do some work in order to do it? Absolutely going to have to do some work. Like, it's not out of the box, but like, are all the pieces in the box? Yes.
Yep.
Oh yeah, I could totally run. You could not only run Star Frontiers, you could have a lot of fun putting the pieces together to package it all up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would totally. Yeah, you could totally do that. I've been playing Minecraft. Schmitty has a new mod pack. I've been playing it for a little while. It seems really stable. I do have to check one thing. I'll check it tomorrow or Thursday. As long as that mod's in there, and I just have to go test it. Like, I think I'm just going to creative mode, give myself some. It's the thing for making ender pearls. Otherwise, we don't have a reliable way of getting ender pearls other than grinding endermen, which will slow down some of the other parts of the game.
Mm-hmm.
So I like previous mods. We've had the ender flowers where we've been able to grow the pearls.
Yep.
That mod did not make it into that mod's not available for our current version. So there was another mod I had that made these like vines that ender pearls grew off of. I got to check to make sure that's in there.
That's cool.
Otherwise, I'm ready to start talking to Schmitty about loading up the server. And we can start talking about having a having a launch night. And all, and we should probably
Valheim, but I'll do it.
Yeah. We can put Valheim can wait. I would definitely be up for some Minecraft.
Yeah, I mean, we need to talk about, like, I need to run everybody back through what's in the mod pack, what's not in the mod pack, some of the changes, things like that. But we can, I think we're pretty close. I just need to, like I said, I need to check this one mod, because if we don't have a reliable way to cultivate some ender pearls, it'll be tough. Let's see what else really quick. I did a shit ton of house cleaning this weekend. My schedule had also on top of my weekly, bi-weekly, and monthly cleanings, I had the quarterly cleaning, which involved going through all my closets and making sure everything was squared away, which was good because I did actually fix a few things in my pantry and in a couple of my other closets. It was, I spent basically, I don't know, 7 or 8 hours cleaning on Saturday. Like, it was a full day of cleaning. And then I did more cleaning yesterday when quarantine was over. And then lastly, we played NBA. We talked about that. Lastly, I was just chilling Sunday night on the couch and stumbled on one of my Samsung, channels, 21 Jump Street from the 80s. The launch vehicle for what's his face?
Depp and Grieco.
No, not Grieco. Nothing launched Richard Grieco.
Oh no, it's always got to be Depp
Johnny
and Grieco.
Depp.
It's always got to be Depp and Grieco.
Anyway,
it's an old Saturday Night Live sketch where they would bring up on the news. They would bring up pictures of both of them. They go, Depp and Grieco, Grieco and Depp, Depp and Grieco, Grieco and Depp, back and forth. So yeah.
So I watched a couple of episodes from it, and I forgot that. Like, besides being kind of a cheesy cop show, and it was kind of a cheesy cop show, there was a lot of stuff it taught. Like the episodes I watched were all about like the crack epidemic, and like it was like, and I went and like quickly looked it up on Wikipedia, and then it jogged my memory. They did stuff about hate crimes, eating disorder. Like, it was like a teen show. Like, it's a cheesy cop show, but it also taught stuff. Like, it dispensed knowledge.
Yeah.
And I was just feeling nostalgic. Like, I watched a couple episodes of it and I was like, this is pretty cheesy, but like, in a good cheesy way. Like, I'm just enjoying my nostalgia tonight.
Oh, look, here's a bunch of people that are like 25 years old that they're playing high school students. And
dude, I'll tell you, when I was 16 watching that show, I was like, this doesn't seem very realistic. And at now 49, when I saw Depp, I'm like, he looks like a fucking child. It totally works. Like, yeah, when I was 16, I was like, no way do 16-year-olds look like that. No, that's just Hollywood people don't look like normal people. But like at 49, I was like, Johnny Depp looks like a child in this show. Yeah. So
I don't know what it was on or when it was on, but I have never seen a single minute of that show.
It was on Fox.
I know. I know that the two of them were in it. I know the premise of it, but I don't think I've watched.
That was Grieco and Depp and Holly Robinson.
Okay. And super quick. The premise of it is.
Oh, I know the premise. I just never saw it. Yeah.
So yeah, it was when Fox first launched. Yeah. It was one of the handful of like first shows on Fox, and it was their edgy teen police show that was like about like high school life and all that stuff and drugs and stuff like that, which for the 80s was like very topical, right? Like it was,
I mean, that was Fox.
It was Fox, yeah. So, but it was good. Like, I mean, it's not a great show, but like I have fond memories. I used to watch. I watched a lot of TV when I was a teenager. So like, occasionally finding that nostalgic stuff. I just kind of wax nostalgic while watching it. So anyway, so that's me. We should probably, timing wise, wrap up and hit the after show.
Phil, I've got one in here for you. So ready yourself.
I see it bolded.
All right. So thank you to our patrons: Brandon Michael Smith, Brantley Harris, Brian King, Brian Kurtz,
Chris Steele,
Cubano, Eileen Barnes, Eric Mengi, Heptalema, and JT Evans. And thank you to everyone for listening tonight.
Indeed. If you are free on Tuesday evenings at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. the Queen's time, come join us live on Twitch, where you can chat with the other listeners in the chat room for life and ask us the occasional question.
If you can't make the live show, check out our podcast each week, wherever you get your podcasts. Pick out some of the other shows in the Misdirected Mark Network, such as They're a Super Geek, Mastering Dungeons, Bone Store and Obsidian, The FM Gamers, Pandas Talking Games, The Gnomecast, Janku Hustle, The Lounge, Bonus Experience, and of course, back episodes of She's a Super Geek. You can and should always also check out our sibling podcasts, Tabletop Bellhop, The Knights of the Night, and the always amazing Gaming and BS.
Before you decide whether that roll hit or miss, leave us some feedback. You can reach us directly on the old-fashioned emails, mmp@misdirectedmark.com. If you want to scream at us on Twitter for endorsing Fudging, feel free. That's at the show. The show of the network is both at Misdirected Mark. You can reach him at Robert M. Everson, him at GM Gerrymander, and I am DNA Phil. But if you're going to yell about the episode, only use the Misdirected Mark one. Don't tag us. I'm just kidding. You can tag us, but don't. All right. Anyway, go ahead.
Hey, if you like what we do here and any other shows in the Misdirected Mark Network, you can support these Patreon campaigns. Misdirected Mark, Misdirected Mark, Word Scramble. The Misdirected Mark podcast, Mastering Dungeons, and Pandas Talking Games are all at patreon.com/MMP. Django Hustle is at patreon.com/Django Hustle, and Bonus Experience is at patreon.com/Bonus Experience. Patrons of MMP, Mastering Dungeons, and Pandas Talking Games get access to the after show, pre-production show notes, musical parodies, the Bamboo Lounge, and other special releases.
This has been a Misdirected Mark production, the media arm of Encoded Designs. Mic drop.
We out.